For the Von Erichs themselves, what were they like to work with?
Super awesome. Carrie actually helped me with because I was throwing shot and discus in high school. And I know that Cornette says that I was like the shot put champion of Lubbock. Actually, I was better at discus. I actually set my high school record for discus at my senior year of high school. And that was because Carrie helped me with my throw and my delivery of just tilting my hand and just getting, with like my ring finger and my pinky finger, just doing a little twist. And it actually helped me get like 10 feet further on my throw. And you wouldn't think that something like that would matter. And it did. And he helped me with that. And we went to the gym a lot. And it's funny because Kevin to this day will proclaim what a great athlete I was, because I would whip those boys in racquetball. They could not beat me in racquetball. And it was fun playing them, but then they kind of got spoiled sports, because after you beat them 4 or 5 times, they don't want to play with you no more.
Now, did you notice any of the issues they're known for, or was it similar to Gino where you never saw that side of them?
Actually, with the Von Erichs, it was more prevalent because they'd no show a lot. I mean, we'd have them booked for events and then they wouldn't show up. And I actually saw Kerry lace up his head. This was like when the Walkmans came out. He actually laced up his headphones into his boots, and then when he went to go raise up, the headphones came down, and he just kind of laughed and like, "Oh God, I got to do this over again." Had to relace his boots up. I saw it more, and especially with Carrie. I didn't see it with Kevin, but I did with Chris and Mike, and especially with Carrie, I did.
Now, there was some controversy when WWE put them in the Hall of Fame. Some people were saying that Mike and Chris might not belong in the Hall of Fame, but I know you worked with Mike. Do you feel it was good to put the whole family in at once, or should they have only put the ones that were more successful in the WWE Hall of Fame?
I don't see how, like, if you wanted to put Kevin and Carrie in there, that they would have not done it if they didn't include the whole family. That's how tight those brothers were, that it was one for all and all for one. And if you were just going to put Carrie in there, I can't see Carrie just going by himself. Carrie would have wanted everybody in there with him. They wouldn't have done it unless everybody did it all.
I wrestled Kevin mainly for 13 months. I told the story about when I come in and I come in out of NWA WCW, and I was coming back home. My home is Fort Worth, Texas. And brother, they George Scott was the booker. Fritz was the owner. Fritz owned the territory. George Scott was the booker. I dropped my bag on the floor, and he dropped the world strap on the top of my bag, and he said, "You're the champ." I said, "I'm the champ." I said, "Brother," I said, he said, "You're the hottest thing I got." I said, "What do you mean? I ain't been on your TV." He said, "But you've been on Atlanta TV, and you've beaten everybody on Atlanta TV, so you're the champ." And I said, "So who was the champ before me?" I mean, I didn't know. It's Chris Adams. Well, I said, Chris Adams was slapping that co-pilot on a plane and getting deported at that time. But I went to Real Rogers Coliseum in Fort Worth, and that's where I won the strap. George told me to tell everybody I beat him in El Paso or some dadgum place, and I tell everybody I never beat Chris Adams for that belt. Just like Ronnie Garvin and the national heavyweight strap, I went to Bass was wrestling him at ringside, and I was at ringside with Bass wrestling him. I picked the belt up, put it on, and walked off, and I was the champ. That was it. And he had to try to take it back. And that's the way it was several different in my career. I'm gonna get a little bit comfortable. The Von Erichs was a complete different kind of wrestlers, because when I started wrestling, David had already died, but all the rest of them were still alive. and I started wrestling Kevin Von Erich, and I wrestled Kevin Von Erich every night for like 13 months. We sometimes it was I had to help him in the ring. I had to. He would be so messed up, drugs or whatever. I don't want. I don't personally want to get into that unless I have to about that part of it. But everybody knows they was all on drugs and strung out on drugs. And I said in some things that they snorted a whole territory straight up their nose. So with that being said, the finish, trying to get the finish with the dudes. The one that sticks out in my mind is at the Cotton Bowl. The Cotton Bowl sold out. It's drizzling rain. It's 45 degrees, and we get there like 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning. And we start going over finishes from the opening match to the main event. Well, me and Kev, I'm dropping the belt back to Kev, and we start going over a finish like at noon. And when I go to the ring at 10 o'clock, 10, whatever the time was, the temperature had dropped and it was drizzling rain even harder. The mat was soaking wet, and still ain't got a finish from Fritz or from Kevin. So I knew that I was dropping the belt back to him because I was leaving because I was done. I was physically done whooping his butt every night. And that's pretty much what you had to do when you was in the ring with the Von Erich. You had to, if they would come back and say, heck of a match. And then but you had to pound them. You had to hit them hard. And I asked Terry Gordy, I said, me and Terry was tight. I said, Terry, how, because this is after the Freebird Von Erich feud. I said, how do you deal with them? He said, Bart, just go to the ring and just beat the living hell out of them. That's what everybody done. And they would come back and say, "Oh man, great match." And that was pretty. It was pretty much every night, every stinking night that if you had a Von Erich, no matter which one of them it was, except for maybe Mike. Mike wasn't too bad. David was a good. David was the cream of the crop, brother. If he'd been alive today, there'd still be a territory in Texas, I think. And that's like I said, that's my opinion. And I don't think for one iota that them boys cared about the business. I don't think back then. I'm talking about back then. They wanted to do their drugs and what they've done, and that was it. For them to continue 10 years before TBS become TBS, the Superstation, and they were broadcasting everywhere and doing all kinds of stuff. Fritz had a meeting with Channel 11 and Channel 21 and 4 or 5 other stations down there in Texas, and they wanted to syndicate and do and make a Superstation. And can you imagine if the Superstation had been in Dallas Fort Worth instead of Atlanta? Because they would have. With Fritz, they were in a meeting. They come out of the meeting. Fritz told Rick Manning or one of them to go back in there and tell them no deal. That my sons they're good for the state. Statewide, they're good. Maybe nationwide, they're good. But worldwide, they can't do it. And the state got this running it statewide or nationwide, got them. Got them good. But I'm not. I have more respect for their daddy, and he was like an idol to me, and it was one of my goals to wrestle in that territory, not be the world heavyweight champion, but just go there and be able to wrestle and be at home and be at home and be on top. But when I broke into business, Fritz told me, he said, "No, you got to go out and you got to make a name for yourself. Then you come back here." And that's the way it was, and that was what I done. I left and went and made a name for myself and come back. And I was world heavyweight champion.
My granddad was a farmer, if nothing else. Like, he had a little house at my Uncle Kevin and Aunt Pam's like property. I guess it was his property, and then Aunt Pam and Uncle Kevin have a house there, but whatever. And he called us all like we were different types of poop. I know that's stupid, but the grandkids, there was double P, double I, double. So I was like triple poop, whatever. I don't know. It's just what he did. Poop jokes are big in our house, okay? And so, but he would put us in his dump trucks and everything. It's like he loved land. We had a ton of land in Denton, Texas, and he loved his land. And he had his tractors, and he had everything, and he had diesel, like actual gas pumps, everything. Like, if we were riding the four-wheeler all day, we had our own gas pumps and everything from my free from my granddad. But anyway, here's a story. Like, I can't even explain my granddad, but here's a story. He was like, "Hey girls, you want to go in the bucket?" And that just means like we want to go in the dump truck and go in the bucket that like goes up in his little dump truck. So we all get in and we're in the bucket like always, and we usually pick plums or berries or whatever in the bucket. Well, no, there was a whole family of black widows with all its eggs in the bucket with us. So I'm like, oh my God, because I'm sitting next to it. And my cousins are like, well, what's your problem? And I'm like, no. So I'm trying to tell my granddad, you try to get out of the bucket, and you're like, hey, you can't see our little arms. You can't. The bucket is very deep. Anyway, we finally get down. We're all huddled in the corner, by the way, because we won't want to be by the black widows. So we finally get all like pulled down, and we all run out. And we're like, Granddad, there's a whole bucket full of spiders. So Granddad takes his big hand. Y'all know his hand. Like, I have him too. I'm actually, my husband and I have the same size hand, which is actually a huge compliment to my husband. My hand is bigger than most men. Hannibal, the next time we see each other, can we please compare hands? I swear to God, it's like, it makes people feel a little inferior.
How was your experience working with the Von Erichs?
I love the Von Erichs. Hannibal, you shouldn't have met a nicer bunch of young men. And I loved them all. And I was there after. I met David one time in St. Louis when I worked in Kansas City Territory. But as far as Kevin and Mike and Terry and even little Chris, it was the nicest guys. Just like they knew us their whole lives, talked to us really good. And really great. They were characters. They were like great big kids, grown kids. As a matter of fact, one day I was in San Antonio, and Chris Von Erich said, "Bobby, I'm going to carry your bags for you." I said, "All right, Chris, you can carry them." He says, "Bobby, one day you're going to be carrying my bags." I bust out laughing and everything. But I was there when Mike killed himself. And what was ironic about that was, Hannibal, was just a couple of days before, we were in a high school gym doing one of those fundraisers, and there was a roll of tape there on the floor from the high school. And Mike Von Erich said, "Oh, I ain't going to take that tape. I ain't going to use it because to me that'd be stealing. I don't want to do nothing wrong." And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 days later, he's missing. And then we find out he zipped himself up in a sleeping bag and took a bunch of pills and ended his sickness, which I was there when he had the sickness, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's toxic shock syndrome. And he was frail and he tried to come back to wrestling. I don't think Mike ever wanted to be a wrestler. And I was there and I teamed with the Von Erichs and I loved it. I was in 6-man tags with them and this and that. And Kevin said, "We always liked asking Bobby Fulton to come and be a part of our 6-man tag matches whenever they needed me and everything. So it was a great experience. And Hannibal, I'm going to tell you something. We were the WWE and world class, worldwide before the WWE, because we went to Israel and wrestled. We went to Lynn, Massachusetts, and sold it out. I remember going to Chicago to the airport when I was in WCW, and people knew me, and I'm not just saying it. At the airport before they knew the rest of the boys that was a WCW. Why? Because of world class wrestling. And they told me that. World class was strong and it was powerful and it was worldwide. We even had people from Japan come over and do videos for the local TV stations in Japan before we even went to Japan because of world class wrestling television. So it was powerful, very powerful. But as far as the Von Erich boys, I love the Von Erich boys, and tragedy what happened to the family.
Like you were saying, not all good memories from world class, obviously.
Well, I was working twice a day, and that was almost every day. So I had no time for myself at all. And it was because the Von Erichs, there was always one of them or two of them missing. So I would do the first match in one town and the main event in the other. It was just overworked. So those times were very fun.
Yeah, it seems like that's coming out more and more lately with like Jeff Jarrett and different people were talking about how Kevin doesn't show up, Kerry doesn't show up. Like, you know what I mean? It's starting to get out there more that they were just, I know people knew that, but it just seems to be more out there with like more like casual fans and stuff that they realize those two guys were kind of AWOL for a bit.
Well, it wasn't only them, it was also Mike as well. I mean, when he wasn't hurt, obviously, he was hurt and he was out for a while, but it was like covering for everyone. So it was tough. Wasn't fun, and that's why I actually left. I didn't aspire to be a wrestler. That wasn't my plan at all. It just kind of fell into my lap, and a lot of the people that wrestled, they're second generation, or they've always wanted to be a wrestler from the time that they were very young. And that wasn't the case with me. I was making really good money before I actually got into wrestling. Matter of fact, I remember George Weingroff and Gino Hernandez and some other people, they would say, "Why do you want to wrestle? Why would you do that? You don't go into the business." I drove up in a new Jaguar, and I just remember everybody wondering what the hell. And in my mind, I didn't know that, what kind of money they were making. I thought it was a lot more. I knew that it was a good opportunity for me, and a lot of people would have loved to have that opportunity. And, so I didn't, I treated everybody well. And I actually wasn't like the other Von Erichs. I went out there and tried to work with them. I didn't try to hurt them. And everybody used to say to me, "Please don't fucking hurt me."
So they were working a little bit snug and a little bit stiff with the opponents, the other Von Erichs?
You ask anybody, especially with Kevin, everyone hated to work with him. And not a little snug. They always said that they got hurt. And that's what that was. I think Kevin was better. Kerry was better, but I do know that Kevin used to really, really potato people. That he would hurt them.
What were your thoughts overall on the Von Erichs in general? Like each one of them, because they were all very different individuals. We'll start with David. What were your thoughts on David?
Do you remember my plaid jacket, the red, not red, the blue and yellow one?
Yes.
See it in some of the YouTube videos. I still have that and can still fit into it. So I may have to wear that along with those other TV jackets that had the monogram. Now, back to the Von Erichs. Tell me your question again.
We'll just go one by one because they were all so different. What were your thoughts on David?
Well, David had the most passion. He was most like his father. He was most intense. He was a great guy. He was pleasant and affirming, but he was filled with ideas, and you just knew instinctively that he was the business. He lived the business. It was a natural for him, and he could be the toughest Fritz-like person in the ring that you would ever find.
What about Kerry?
Kerry was flaky. He had a heart of gold. He had the body of a god. He had a playful side to him. I think I may have told you the other night, Fritz's office was upstairs at the Sportatorium. That's where his office was during the week, and his secretary was up there. Only part of the building that was air conditioned had shag carpet on the floor around Fritz's desk. The boys
love the shag
never
carpet.
dressed with the other guys downstairs. They always dressed in Fritz's office. And they would bring their wives in sometimes on Friday nights. And Kerry, of course, was a god. Everybody wanted to be around him. Kerry took great delight in parading around Fritz's office without a stitch of clothing on and bring guests in with his wife in the room, and she would be totally mortified that these strangers would come in and there's her husband walking around naked. And Kerry thought it was hilarious. He just got the biggest kick out of it. He was a flake. He was fun. He had a heart of gold. He was great in the ring. Kerry, just never had anybody to really love him, to help him with some life decisions, because those guys were such superstars that they would say anything, do anything, give them anything, even substance abuse wise, to get close to them. And, as you know, we all know, sadly, there were some bad choices, but Kerry was a good guy.
What about Kevin?
Kevin was a good guy too. Kevin, kind of a mystic personality. Kevin kind of lived in his own world, almost like the Freebirds. Those boys had enough diversity. There were not any two of them alike. Kevin wasn't as hard a worker after my first 4 or 5 years. The barefoot routine, they argued about that. Is that really as much of a gimmick as it is the fact that he just doesn't want to have to take the time to lace up those boots? But
I don't know. Even now he still doesn't wear shoes.
Yeah, he probably doesn't. Kevin just, he's the one that lived through it all. He's been through so much, even with Fritz, and then the demise of his family. It's just hard for me not to say anything other than revering thoughts about Kevin, because he's a hero, not only that he's still in the business, but he's still in life.
Absolutely.
So I have great appreciation and respect for Kevin.
I think a lot of that too. I think, there's a lot of credit to Pam too. Pam is an amazing woman, and, she's been by his side through all of that. Another testament to Kevin was, I think he raised Marshall and Ross to ensure that they didn't live that life, that they don't get into anything. They worked for me for years, and they're such great guys. And, I love seeing them go on the run that they're going on now, because, I think that, the Von Erichs were the family that you wish you had oftentimes on television. But watching Marshall and Ross, everything about them is authentic now, and I think it's wonderful to see. And you've seen Marshall and Ross in person too. You've spent time with them as well.
Yes, I have. And I remember Pam. Pam was a doll, gorgeous, absolutely, brunette, very quiet. And she has been that liturgy wife, better for worse, sickness, health, rich or poor, death do us part, traditional wife. And she is a hero. And, those boys, one of them looks a little bit like Kerry, and then the other one looks like his mother with that dark hair.
Yeah.
But they're both good looking guys. Of course, I don't know how old they are. They're probably in their early 30s now, but I hope they do real well, and I hope we get to, here, I'm not going to commit to that. I'm not going to say we. Hope you get to use them some.
Here's me showing. When we went to Israel, we were thinking about the match and stuff, and my dad was on his phone trying to learn as much Hebrew as he could for interviews and promos. And I'm like, man, that's pretty professional. to learn the country's tongue. And then that's pretty cool.
Pretty crazy if you think about it. With world class and Israel, it's like obviously they got that over there, but your dad and his brothers were like God's over there. But it's like, wow, Israel, Texas. It seems
I
like
know.
the oddest combination.
It really does, and how big Texas was in Israel. Like there's people love Texas and Israel, which blew my mind. And in Japan, we were in Japan at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, and we got this little rest stop. We eat noodles and get gas and all this stuff. And there's it said, "Welcome, howdy, y'all, welcome to Texas," and I had like Texas stuff everywhere, and it's pretty unreal. The Israel thing blows my mind too. My dad said that was
how random is that? It's like a little tiny speck on the map on the opposite side of the earth, in both directions. It's like,
he said he couldn't believe how far away from home he was, and how many people. It was the first time he got weak in his knees from the sea of people when he got off the plane. So there's no way that's for me. And cops were telling him, don't look up, don't make eye contact, look at the ground, walk through the barriers, had barriers and stuff. And he waved at a lady, and the whole place erupted. And the cops threw him on the shoulder. He thought he was getting arrested. He's like, it was crazy. And I was like, man, that's you never thought that. And it was the first time they had a ceasefire in years between the Palestinians and the Jewish people. They had a ceasefire to watch wrestling, which is crazy.
Yeah, and it was actually popular in Jordan and in Israel, which in Israel, the way they were able to watch world class it wouldn't be great quality, but they could move their antenna where they could pick up the Jordan station, which showed world class. And so it was like these two enemies of each other had a common I don't want to say hero, but they both enjoyed watching wrestling, and I just, what a cool thing something like wrestling could do on a big
the ratings were 100%
geopolitical scale,
which is crazy. If the ratings are 100%, is on Saturday, the show came on Saturdays right after Shabbat, so they weren't allowed to watch TV until after Shabbat. And so right when Shabbat was over, the first thing they'd watch, and it was world class.
It has to be one of the first times in history anything had 100% show a rating.
So everybody's watching. Any of our Jewish friends were telling us, he's like, the whole country was watching every match, everything they did. And for some reason they picked, my dad to love. They loved the other brothers too, but there was something about my dad, and it's crazy too. My dad takes a lot of his wrestling mindset towards the country, towards Israel. He's thinking bases it on it being a small country surrounded by enemies and all this stuff. And
he calls it the ultimate babyface story. He's somebody that's outmatched, outgunned, but you're standing for what you believe is right, and you're willing to fight your heart out to do that. You want to do the right thing, and it's kind of my dad to a T. So I think it's kind of cool, and going over there, there was all these people in the crowd telling stories that we met, just saying, when we were kids, we'd wrestle on the playground, and I would be this Von Erich, and we would be that, and
it's the same stories we hear in Texas from fans and stuff. It's like crazy. We're on the other side of the world, and
it's just mind blowing. It's really crazy.
Kerry was wrestling. I can't remember who he was wrestling, but anyway, he was listening to music with his headphones, and he bends over and he's tying his boots, but he's not paying attention to what he's doing. And he went to stand up, and when he did a forward roll because his the wiring from his headphones was. That's not the end of it. After he survived that, he thought he was on later in the show, but he wasn't. He was on next. So they rang the bell, and his music started, and they said, "Gary, go, go, go!" And he went, "Oh shit!" And he still off, and he went to the ring. The only problem is he hadn't put his tights on yet. So he just had on like long sweatsuit pants. So he went to take them down, and we realized that there wasn't anything under them.
One of the biggest differences is, to tell you how different it was back when I started with Fritz, is every night you wrestled, they had one of those big coolers for fishing, one of those $200 jobs. They would have that full of beer and set it in the dressing room, of course, you couldn't drink it before you wrestled. But everybody who finished wrestling, there was beer there for you. You know, I mean, it was just amazing. And Fritz was a sweet guy. He was nothing like his gimmick. Just like the Von Erichs were nothing like their gimmick. They're just sweet, kind, vulnerable kids, you know, that just never really grew up. And a lot, you know, when I first was invited into Fritz's office, and they were going to give me, told me what my job was. Fritz sat behind this big desk in a big office at the Sportatorium, and when I came in there, Kerry Von Erich was actually sitting in his dad's lap. And that's just how close they were. He actually had the meeting. Of course, he stood up after a couple of minutes, but he actually sat in the dude's lap, and that's how close they were. And, of course, Kerry never said a word because Fritz said everything, and what Fritz said, you know, that's what went, and it worked. He was a smart dude.
There was so much tragedy like going on, and obviously at this point, Kerry will, or a little bit later, I mean, Kerry ends up leaving, so it's just kind of Kevin there toward the latter part when USWA and Jarrett and Lawler become involved. So it just seems like one thing after another. Then he loses his own boys. I mean, then you can't function, right? I mean, you lose your own kids to not only tragedy and death and suicide and stuff, but then eventually lose them to WWF.
Well, pretty much, I was there when David, I'd been there a while, actually, when David died in Japan.
Right.
That was pretty much Fritz's downfall. They put a lot of bread and butter into David. And David was Kerry, of course, grabbed the reins after David passed, but Kerry couldn't hold a candle to David Von Erich as far as ability, and he just had looks, is all he had. But David was a superstar. They were actually, Fritz was in the NWA and always was, and they were actually going to put the title when he got back from Japan. They were going to put it on David, and ended up putting it on Kerry in the Cotton Bowl. Ric Flair did, but David was the Grand Marshal and the one that was carrying the whole torch.
Yeah, they always say, like, David is the best wrestler of the brothers. Kevin's the high flyer. Kerry's the looks. You know, like, it seemed like they all got a different piece, but everyone always says that David was definitely the best worker.
Absolutely. Kevin was horrible. A great guy, but he was just... Wow. You know, yes, I want to, you know, wrestling, we all know what it is, but it was different then. And especially when they own the company and it's their television and they're paying you, you better have your strap tightened up, buddy, because they wasn't playing, especially Kevin. You know, Kevin would kick you with those bare feet and think because he was barefooted that it didn't hurt, you know, but jeez, he was a nut. And Kevin, of course, lives in Hawaii now, and I haven't talked to him real lately, but last time I talked to him, I was having some problems, and you know, he's the type guy. He said, "Man, just come stay with me in Hawaii. I've got horses. I've got everything you want. Just please come stay." And that's just the kind of people all the Von Erichs were. I knew Chris. Chris was a sweetheart, and Mike was a sweetheart. And, you know, of course, they didn't have the size of the looks, and didn't really have the ability their big brothers had. But yeah, it was Fritz pretty much was when David died. That's the day it all changed. Everything changed. It's like Fritz wasn't involved anymore after that. And you know, if it's not but 5 people a night, you see less people. After a couple of years, 5 people a night not coming, it adds up, you know. And the crowds were a little smaller. They were still nice. We made a comfortable living. Of course, Rod wouldn't agree, but because he always had to take somebody out. I didn't have to pay for my dates. Rod had to pay for his.
Yeah, but it was worth it, Johnny.
Yeah, it was as pretty as those dang women were, buddy. And you ought to see the pretty one he's got now. Woo! She's beautiful. Rod's been real fortunate, as long as I've known him, to have the most beautiful women on the planet.
What was it in Texas called? For the Von Erich?
World Class Championship Wrestling.
Okay, that's where I went. So I went to World Class Championship Wrestling. And I went there in the first week of January. And I didn't want to leave Eddie because I ended up going back to Florida, and he told me that the father, Fritz Von Erich, wanted me down there. So when I went down there, he said that he wanted me to change my name to Billy Von Erich. I said, I'm not going to be Billy Von Erich. I'm Billy Jack. I've got my name already set in stone, you know, and I'm supposed to be the NWA champion. And he said, well, I don't know if that's ever going to happen or not. You know, my son had it, and they took it off him. And Von Erich, Fritz Von Erich and I got into a pretty heated exchange. Then in the Dallas Sportatorium, Mike Von Erich and I were wrestling Jake the Snake Roberts and somebody else. And after the match was over, I mean, it was just a horrific match. And, I mean, anybody can work with Jake the Snake. He's one of the greatest workers in pro wrestling history. But Mike Von Erich, you know, was just pushed too soon, as was Chris Von Erich. And I was getting ready to get out of there, and all of a sudden, who arrived? Tom Laughlin, the real Billy Jack. I mean, the movie that's why I became Billy Jack Haynes, or really Billy Jack, because I love the movie so much, Billy Jack. And Tom Laughlin arrives with his wife in Dallas and tells me that I have to give up the Billy Jack name because she's copywritten it, the movie. So he was very nice, and so was his wife. He's passed away. Both of them have now. God bless them. And I said, well, can I use the name Billy Jack Haynes? Do you mind that? And he said, no, that's okay, just not Billy Jack. I said, okay. We shook hands, and everything was okay. But I later found out that Fritz had tipped him off and tried to, you know, to make me become Billy Von Erich. So I told him to go fuck himself.
What did you think when the Von Erichs did that on TV? Because basically they come out, oh, he's not really related. He's not really the Von Erich. What was going through your mind at that point? Like, screw these guys?
Well, I thought, how stupid, you know, because it in reality, looking back, and I wasn't in the States at the time. I just had heard about it. You know, this was all second. I believe I had just left, and it was all, from other people that told me, that they'd gone on television, on national television. I think it was actually on that Channel 39 that went all over the world. And I just thought, well, it's kind of stupid for them to actually say that, because if they hadn't said anything, I would have just, gone by the wayside, and nobody had not. They could have said anything, but I think it made them look like liars. I don't see what the purpose of it was, but it is what it is, and that's what they did.
Hi. He has a WWE shirt on. My family helped you with that company. What do you think about that?
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, but then they all died. So great job, WWE. No, just kidding. That's terrible. I know. Only I can do that. Only I can joke about the Von Erich deaths. Anyone else does it. It's really awkward.
Spent some time in the Dallas territory. Any memories of the Von Erichs?
Well, one thing that I would say about the Von Erichs is that they had a gold man. And what really hurt their territory was the fact that not just them. Same thing happened with Jerry the King Lawler. Same thing happened with Nick Gudas. Same thing happened with the Von Erich. Same thing happened in Florida. What would happen, you get the family that runs the business. After a while, everybody that came to work for these guys, the Von Erich, if you start becoming more popular with the fans than the Von Erich, they find some reason to either get rid of you or to break you down. They would not let anybody be above them. Now, I was there one time and they had a guy, his name was Brian, what was his last name? I know his name was Brian. And by accident, just by accident, he did a thumb. The name probably come to us before this is over. He hit you in the throat with the thumb and tape, and he hit Kevin in the throat with the thumb. Well, Kevin been up all night doing. I don't want to say what he did on TV, but you got an idea. He been up all night partying. So as soon as he hit him in the throat, Kevin started vomiting, foaming at the mouth, and he ended up having a straight seizure in the ring. In the ring. So everybody thought that came from Brand Adidas. They thought it came from his thumb. So the next day, everywhere Brand went, sell out. Completely sell out. He sold out Dallas, sold out Fort Worth, sold out Mesquite, sold out Austin. Everywhere we went was a complete sellout. What do you think the Von Erichs did? They started beating them. And once they beat him, we had no more heel. There was no heat on the heels. Because as soon as, like the Ultimate Warrior, he was a heel when he first went into world class. And he started becoming real popular as a heel. Well, they didn't want to beat him because they figured they're going to kill the house. So what they did, they turned him baby faces and used him as a partner. Yeah. Then when Curry came back, he couldn't get above the Ultimate Warrior. So guess what they did? They stopped booking him. Me and the Warrior used to sit in our apartment for 2 weeks. And they was booking shows, and we was out on none of the shows for 2 weeks. He was fortunate; he had Japan to go to, and also the Warrior, also with Vince McMahon won them in WWF. It was no WWE; there was WWF. They won him, so he went to Japan, did his little tour. When he left Japan, he went to the WWE. With me, he became one of the biggest stars that Vince ever had. I went to Puerto Rico, so we all went somewhere else, but he would not book us. We couldn't even get work because they could not rise above him. So they either get rid of you or they start beating you every night in the ring or kill you off. And Jerry the King Lawler did it. Nick Gudas did it in Knoxville. Dusty Rhodes did it to every wrestler that came through Florida. If you start getting bigger than Dusty in Florida, you out of there, buddy. And that's the difference between Ole and Amster. If you start getting bigger than Ole, instead of stopping you, he push you more. Because Ole's looking at, hey, this kid could draw more money than I can, so why has I got myself on top position when I got a kid right here could make me 5 times the money? But the way Dusty Rhodes and the Von Erichs, them guys said, I don't care how much money this guy could draw, I want to be king. This is man. I don't want nobody being bigger than me. And that would hurt all these territories. what made Vince McMahon so great is that he did not wrestle. And when he did win in the ring with Stone Cold Steve Austin, you didn't see Vince going away beating Stone Cold. See? Yeah. Now Dustin would have beat him. The Von Erich would have beat Stone. There would have been no Stone Cold Steve Austin if Vince had the same mentality. And they did. Vince went in the ring to make Stone Cold bigger.
What an adventure living with the Von Erichs for a year and a half.
And that's a good segue into that. I was going to ask you about that next, actually, because of course everybody knows about the reputation of the Von Erich boys.
Yeah, we were all kind of bad boys. Of course, I got more corrupted there. I guess it's like my whole life of straightness was kind of succumbing to this party stage in life, and I just had, Fritz and Doris were like family to me, and this is a great story. And when I see Kevin in Hawaii, I'll see him again this summer. He's got a beautiful place in Kauai. It's absolutely beautiful. 31 acres, 10 acres of wetland right across from the beach, and it has everything on it. It's just absolutely breathtaking. And his wife Pam, his two sons, Marshall and Ross, their wives, everybody's got the gardener, the groundkeeper. There's a whole bunch of houses, and he's made it really good. But back to Lake Dallas with the Von Erichs. After this great night of David finds this pretty good-looking girl, and she meets me at the door and just grabs me and kisses me, and so that was a surprise. I'll leave it there. And so that night, we finally go to sleep. The next morning, I hear, baby, get up. I said, what? I see David in his robe, in his underwear, and he's got a big Magnum, like a dirty, hairy gun. And he's running across the door, and he sees a cat. Bam, bam, bam. So, I don't like him. I didn't want him to shoot the cat because I hate cats. Comes back and he says, I hate cats. And that's how my first day at the Von Erichs was. And it was, it was crazy. I mean, Doris, the mom, was a saint, an angel. She really got me to, really helped me with my life, getting over the divorce, getting into God and having faith, and just treated me like a real son. And Fritz treated me like a son as well. He put a $100 bill in my check every week and asked me to watch the boys. I said, great. He says, listen, Brian, you got a great reputation, and I'm kind of worried about David and Kevin and Carrie, and I really want you to kind of keep an eye on them for me, if you will. I said, yes, sir, whatever I can, I'll certainly keep an eye on them, 2 eyes. And so we decide together that, we want to take a stab at growing some marijuana. So we clear out this patch. You got to understand, they're on like hundreds and hundreds of acres, and there's Kevin's house, and then Carrie's house, and then David's house, and then the big house where Chris and Mike were still at. And so anyway, they're far away, pretty far, you could ride the horse there. And I get the bush hog and till up the soil, and we all get together. 4 of us are working on this marijuana field, and we have no clue really what we're doing. We're reading out of a book. So, because I forget I can't remember if it was Al Madrill or who it was. They were talking about pounds of pot in the locker room or something, how much the pounds of pot were. And so one of the boys get this get rich quick scheme, and so I'm all in. And I've been reading this book on, I used to do a lot of gardening and stuff with my grandfather in Arkansas, a lot of farming, and we'd always go in the garden. So I knew a little bit about growing things, and before we know it, we have these pot plants, and which is called a sativa. There's an indigo and a sativa pot plant, and we had the sativa pot plants, which can get to be 12, 14 feet high. Well, they're about at least 8, 9 feet tall, and David, I remember David, Kerry, and I put our arms. It took all of us to get our arms around one of these plants, and now here's about 100 plants of these things. I mean, a lot. So reading in the book, it says, don't water them for a few days before you're going to harvest them. I guess it makes the THC go to the buds or something like that. And Kevin leaves. We had 3 hoses, 100-foot hoses hooked together, and there we had a layer of corn around the outside of the pot plants. And so Kevin leaves this hose down there, and he's not even supposed to water them. And why he leaves the hose, I don't know. We're just all thinking about, well, we're going to get rich. Al Madrill's going to get rid of this, but boom, we're going to have some money finally. And and it was all in innocence. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody or do anything wrong. But
and it is legal in Canada now, so
yes, it's legal in Canada. It'll be legal everywhere pretty soon. But so. And it's legal in Florida too, just not to smoke, but that's about to be changed. So all of a sudden, the phone rings at the house, and I hear, and David says, "Yeah, Dad, what's wrong? What did I do?" Okay, he hangs up the phone. He says, "Brian, I got to go to my dad's house. There's something wrong." I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I don't know, but he wants to see me." I said, "Well, okay." So David comes back, and he's like a pale white almost color. And he said, "Oh, you're not going to believe what I've just been through." I said, "What you been through?" He said, "Well, Brock went to the garden. Kevin left the hose. Brock's the guy, the gardener, the farm guy that takes care of the property. And Brock found the pot field and took a piece to Fritz. They both went to the Denton Library, got a encyclopedia or a book that had marijuana in it. They compared it, they looked, and they saw that it was marijuana. So they called David over, and they explained how Brock found the hose leading to the marijuana, and was it your marijuana? And David said, no, it wasn't his. He didn't know how it got there. And so nobody fesses up, and Brock takes the bush hog and mows down every one of those plants to the nth degree. There was nothing left. And that was very disappointing for all of us at the time. So, but quite the experience, I will say.
I know it's a sad story. I was there for David when David died in Japan. I was with David and Kevin on their first trip in Japan. On their first trip when they first went over there. And David, they had the future for David was the NWA belt. Flair was supposed to go that way with the Von Erichs, and they did that big house. When David died, Flair went into the old Texas Stadium and worked with Kevin, the other Von Erich, and it's a sad story, the Von Erich family. They're all down, and Kevin's the only one alive. He's the oldest.
What was your experience like with the Von Erichs?
Well, Fritz Von Erich was a piece of fucking shit. That's what he was. He was a liar. He never was true to his word to me. He's passed away, so I'm using some pretty bad language on him, but he was. He lied to me about everything. In fact, I came very close to knocking the shit out of that old man. I mean, I'm an old man myself now, so it'd be like you knocking the shit out of me. I would have done it. I came very close to it. And then I just said, fuck you, and left. And that's the way I was back then.
How were the kids? Were they
were
all
great.
Yeah.
They were great kids, man. If I had a dad like that, I'd be fucked up on drugs too.
Yeah. What were the Von Erichs like in those days?
Man, loose cannons, man. It was pretty wild. It's pretty sad. It's sad now, looking back at it. At the time, you just shook your head and wondered, what the fuck? What are these guys doing? I felt a lot for Chris Von Erich. He never wanted to wrestle, but he was forced into it. If you're a Von Erich, you're going to wrestle. And Kerry, I think everybody had a soft spot for Kerry because he was just that big kid, man, just trying to have fun in life, and You know, David was definitely the best wrestler out of the bunch. Then you look at
to wrestle them when
oh
they
yeah,
were under the influence.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I don't know if it was worse or better, you know, because sometimes they kind of cooled them down a little bit. It was funny one time. One of my first matches was Gino and I and Chris Adams against the three, and one of them turnbuckled Gino, and Gino went into the corner and he does this, and I yell at him, "Hey, what the hell is that? What kind of move is that?" He goes, "You'll see." So a couple minutes later, I got into the ring and I got thrown into the corner, and I didn't put this shit up. And all of a sudden, here comes Kevin, who was outside the ring, flying across the ring and diving at me and catching me with an elbow and knee and everything else at once, man. Just a massive potato. So that's what you did. It was defense, man. Block everything. So, yeah, it was sad. What, you know, the whole thing, those guys, you know, them dying and committing suicide, it's just senseless crap, man. It really is.
Poor Kerry. Nice kid, but he had obviously some problems. But he got in a motorcycle accident and tore his foot off. Basically, all he had was below the ankle. You know, it was gone. So he had a specially made, you know, shoes and boots. And if you see him at the beach, he'd be walking around getting a tan, but he'd have his wrestling boots on because he had no foot. And we're doing a TV for at the Showboat in Vegas for ESPN. And I'm watching in some of the matches, and Kerry is wrestling a match with Colonel De Beers. And Colonel was a classic. But Kerry, this was a big secret. I mean, very few people knew about Kerry's foot. And De Beers didn't know. Yeah, very few people knew at that time. Big secret. So Kerry's having a match with Colonel De Beers. Kerry falls down. De Beers grabs him to put them in an ankle lock, and all of a sudden, pop! The boot comes off, and Colonel De Beers is looking at this boot in his hand, and he looks over, and there's this leg sticking up that ends in just a little, you know, stump with no foot, and De Beers goes, "Ah!" And he throws the boot up in the air because it freaked him out. And Kerry, it was the weirdest thing. It was like people were in shock because it didn't register what they're seeing. Kerry rolled over, grabbed the boot, went out of the ring, rolled under the ring, and was gone for maybe 5 minutes. Which seems like an eternity when you're filming TV. Right. Maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And De Beers is standing in there, and the referee going, "What in the hell was that?" Pulled the guy's foot off, like he didn't. And then all of a sudden, Kerry rolls back out, gets back in the ring. De Beers is looking at him. He comes over and they start the match again and kept going like nothing happened. And the people are going, "Did something happen?" I mean, it was the weirdest, surrealistic kind of thing. And De Beers came back. He was freaked out. And the people, I don't even know if it registered because it seemed like something that was so unreal that couldn't have happened, but the whole audience was dead quiet. And then got back into the match once it got going, like nothing happened. It was really a unique kind of thing.
I guess Kerry had to explain himself after to...
I don't think they said a word. I mean, he never went on TV or said anything. I think they wanted to keep it a secret.
Now, of course, you're from the Texas territory. Did you have much contact with the Von Erichs over the years?
No, not really. I went in there, did my thing, and they were the stars, and all the rest of us were just the girls on the show. And it's sad, but their territory, their booker, their idea didn't include me, but that's okay.
And Kerry was nice enough to be around. What was the other one?
Kevin.
Kevin seemed more, I don't know, standoffish, or he was a little colder. Kerry seemed like he was more like one of the boys, but Kevin was, and then the little bitty one, it was, what was his name?
And Mike, the one, he eventually passed away too.
Yeah.
Or that Mike was, there was one even smaller than Mike that ended up dying too, but I can't remember. Chris, there was Chris and Mike.
Chris, he was the littlest one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean...
They tried to push him, but he had no talent apparently.
None, and no size.
Yeah.
And I'm the last guy to say anything about being little, but when you're smaller than me, you itty bitty.
Speaking of guys like that, did you ever notice that about the Von Erichs when you were working in World Class, that they were out of it some of the time?
No, I never saw it. Especially I worked a lot of matches with Kevin and Kerry, and I never saw any of the effects of drugs or alcohol or anything on any of them. When they got in the ring, like I said, most of the time when them guys got in the ring, it was business. And Kerry and Kevin, both of them were fantastic to work with. You know, a little stiffer than what I was used to, but they were paying my paycheck, so I'll take a blow or two.
We we had the big tournament in Japan that they had, you know, once a year, I guess, and had me and Murdoch made it to the finals against the Von Erich brothers. So a little backstory. Me and Don Knuddle won the World Tag Team Championships in North Carolina. In the semifinals, we had the Von Erich brothers. The Von Erich brothers said that their daddy had told them that they can't lose, so they had to get disqualified because they couldn't get beat. So anyway, fast forward to Japan, when me and Murdoch are in the finals with the Von Erichs, and they come over and they go, Bob, we want to take the fall on you. I said, no. They go, what do you mean no? I said, my daddy called me, and he told me that I can't drop the fall to the Von Erichs. So the Japanese guy leaves, comes back, and Murdoch, can we take the fall on you? Murdoch says, no, I'm with him. So the Japanese guy goes back over. I said, Dickie, I said, we'll get out there in the middle of the match. I'll just have one of them catch me in something, 1, 2, 3. I said, it's no big deal. I said, I'm just fucking with him. He goes, I know. So anyway, they come back and no, we ain't doing it. If they want to beat me, tell them to fucking beat me. So me and Murdoch go to the ring, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. All of a sudden, the fucking music starts, and here come two little chaps. The Von Erichs wouldn't even come to the ring. Oh, God.
I had a ball with David Von Erich. He was extremely talented, had the charisma to get the job done, and was big enough and tough enough to walk over who he had to walk over to get there. David Von Erich had his father's attitude, which is, I'm the biggest, toughest son of a gun in the world. And he didn't say son of a gun, he said son of a gun. But that was Fritz's attitude, and that was David Von Erich's attitude. And David was my partner. Anything I would ask of him, he would do. He was, he grew up in professional wrestling, and he grew up in really the right part of professional wrestling, so that he understood promotion, box office appeal, and he had it. David just had charisma. And his father had it, but David had it in a more likable way.
I guess you actually almost got the part for Rocky IV. You were one of 3 people, I guess you, Kerry Von Erich, and Dolph Lundgren.
We were the 3 finalists. Kerry was funny. They sent us the script, you know, a good month in advance. And again, Ivan, bless his heart, man, he was awesome. We'd drive up and down the road, man. I'd be memorizing lines for the movie, and and to him as he would drive and just studying. And I wanted to go out there and just crush it, just kill it. And we get out there on the set, and Kerry looks at me, and I didn't know Kerry well. I'd met him a few shows and stuff, and he's like, so like, dude, do you like know your lines? I'm like, hello, they flew us out here to screen test for the final. This is the final screen test between one of the three of us, dude. Like, seriously, true story. It's one of the three of us, and he's like, asked me, do you know the lines? I'm like, do you not? And he's like, oh, I don't know, man. I didn't really like look at him. I'm like, why are you even here? And so I felt pretty confident. I'm like, well, that narrows it down. 50-50 chance here now. Kerry's out of the picture, I'm pretty certain.
Could you talk about your merger with World Class Championship Wrestling?
Yeah, I had met Kerry through the wrestling business and really admired him. He was a great, great wrestler. Looked like $1 million. And what was amazing to me is he had that motorcycle accident, and he really just had about a half a foot, and had a boot that filled in what was missing, and how Kerry could be the wrestler he was. If that had been me, I'd have been hobbling around on crutches the rest of my life. He was just superhuman, and so I really liked him too. And so when he called me and he said, Jerry, we've pissed Dad off and he's not going to help us anymore, and we've run out of money and we're going to close up out here. I said, well, that's a shame. I hate to hear that. And he said, well, I'm just wondering if you'd want to come out and take a look. Before we get the lawyer and file for bankruptcy, why don't you come see if there's any kind of deal you want to do? So I said, well, let me think about it, and because I really didn't want to go. And when I hung up the phone, my wife, and I'll have to tell you this, my grandfather, even though he was an alcoholic, was so smart. And he told me one time, he said, Jerry, as you walk down the creek of life, he said, learn to turn over every rock you see in the creek. He said, now, be careful, because sometimes you'll liable to turn over one that's got a watermarks on it, and you can get bit if you're not quick on your feet. But he said, if you turn them all over, you'll find a gold nugget under one. And so that had kind of been my mantra in life, at least look at every opportunity. So when I hung up the phone from talking to Kerry, my wife Deborah said, you gonna go look? And I said, nah. She said, well, that might be that gold nugget. And so I said, oh, okay. That's the old do as I say and not as I do. So I went and I looked at it, and it was a real opportunity. They were so broke that what really wasn't a huge investment for a promotion. They owed Channel 10, the TV station, $40,000-$50,000. They owed the Sportatorium guy $20,000, and miscellaneous bills, you know, garbage collection, city taxes, business taxes, a total of about $130,000. So I said, well, I don't want to risk all of it. So I called Tommy Watson at Red Man, Pinkerton Tobacco Company, and I said, Tommy, you're sponsoring my matches in Nashville, Memphis. How would you like to be able to advertise and give away samples in Dallas? And he said, how much is it going to cost me? And I said, $60,000. He said, the check's on the way. So now it's a doable deal because I'm 70 from me and 60 from Pinkerton. So we, Erich Emery, Chris Adams, Percy Pringle, they were all out there. Erich was so down on his luck, he was living at the Sportatorium. And none of them had cars because they'd stuck with the Von Erichs and no money, you know, they hadn't gotten paid. So, you know, I had a meeting with them and I said, all right, I'll take 51% and I'll give Kerry and Kevin 49%. And, but I'm boss. So I drew up, I got an attorney to draw up a little contract, and then Fritz called and said, I want to meet with you before you do this deal. So we went out to Fritz's house, and Fritz says, we're sitting in the kitchen, and Fritz's wife is at the sink, and I can't believe how Fritz is talking. He said, let me tell you something. He said, these two boys are both drug heads. They will not keep their word. They're not dependable. And I want you to know that you are doing business with them and not me. Further, I want you to know that my advice is that you get your butt on an airplane and go back to Tennessee. Because these two guys are hopeless. Now that's their daddy with their mother standing at the sink. So can you imagine the dysfunction in that family? I mean, it's pitiful. So I said, okay. And I told outside when I was getting in my car, I said, you boys, I'll meet you back at the Sportatorium in the morning at 9 o'clock. And they did, and I told them, I said, Fritz, in no uncertain terms, isn't a part of this. But if y'all will just be sober on Friday nights, that's all I ask. You don't have to do nothing else. Well, they were for about the first 6 weeks. Then you could tell they were snorted up. Then, before it was over, they were slobbering at the mouth, coked out of their brain. And, but I just didn't count on them. You know, we had other angles. Chris Adams did the student ex-wife angle, that helped. Erich Emery did the USWA versus WCCW, you know, tearing the banner down. And the fans supported us. We made a lot of money. Kevin and Kerry's would get 20 to 30,000 a piece every month. That's how good we were doing. And I don't know, a year and a half in, one night they show up with an attorney and the attorney said, "You've taken advantage of these two boys and their ignorance about business. And it's not fair for you to have half and them only have 25%. So we want to redo the contract to where you get a third and each of them get a third." And I said, "Nope, not for me." I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, "These boys would be lucky to get a bacon and egg sandwich from their father. They're not businessmen. They can't even stay straight long enough to perform once a week." He said, "Well, I don't see it that way." So I said, "Well," I went and got me an attorney, and my attorney said, "Well, Jerry, we can win this lawsuit and win it easy, but here's the way the law works. When you win the lawsuit, they will still be your 49% partner." I said, "You know what? They can't be in business a year. I'm gonna go, because if I don't want them to be my partner anymore, ever." So I went back to Nashville and they filed for bankruptcy 9 months later, went out of business. Now you know the other story.